Hi, Will.
Hi, Bob. How's it going?
I can't complain. How are you doing?
I am quite well. It's great to be here.
Good to have you. Thanks for taking the time. Let me introduce us. I'm Robert Wright. This is The Wright Show, available on both streaming video and via audio podcast. It's on Blogging Heads TV. You're Will Menaker, co-founder and co-host of the spectacularly successful podcast, Chapo Trap House.
Indeed, I am. And this is a first-time, long-time experience for me being on Blogging Heads.
So you have seen or listened to Blogging Heads?
Oh yes, very much so. And back when I was a blogger, it was the go-to place to see heads.
Huh. So this was. Is it too much to say that we were a formative influence on you?
I should be giving you royalties, probably.
You know, I was going to mention that because I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, first, I want to say that you've got a book out. So successful is your podcast that you and your co-hosts have decided to expand your media empire into a whole new dimension. Let's hold it up at the same time.
There we go. I was going to talk like this.
The Chapo Guide to Revolution.
Yeah.
By Chapo Trap House. But you know, on the royalty thing, I do want to put your lawyer in touch with mine because you know, I noticed on your Patreon page. You know, Patreon, as people probably know, is a vehicle by which supporters of podcasts and things support the podcasts and things. You guys are grossing more than $1 million a year. Has that come to your attention?
I'm aware of it.
You are?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what fraction of that generally goes to your most formative influences?
Well, it's like, you know, a moral support that comes from being successful that I think we can, spread the wealth.
Okay, well, I'm feeling the love. That feels a lot better. Thank you.
As Obama said, spread the wealth around.
So are you entering like a higher tax bracket?
Oh yeah, I already have. I'm definitely kicked up to the tax bracket, at least compared to my previous job.
Has that changed any of your views about, you know, tax rates for the rich or anything?
Yes, I'm now a fully libertarian. I'm against all taxation of the wealthy. No, I mean, paying taxes is a lot more difficult now because I don't just have like a W-2, and I'm paying a lot more of them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, it hasn't changed any of my views. I mean, if anything, I would like to pay. I would pay more in taxes if the government would just do my tax return for me. And you know what I mean? And just send me an email every year that says, you owe this, and then just click a button. It's the keeping track of everything that drives me nuts.
Well, it's getting to the point where, you know, technologically speaking, the government is capable of knowing about you everything they would need to know to do your income taxes without you providing any extra data. We're approaching that day.
Well, you know, if they partner with Google and Facebook, I'm sure they could do it tomorrow.
They literally could. This is kind of scary. Yeah. So, how would you describe, and we should say, by the way, lest people get the wrong idea, that million plus doesn't all go to you. You have a
oh, no, not at all. Team. I have other co-hosts and producers and minions that I have to take care of. I have a cat, you know, a good chunk of it goes to my cat.
Yeah. I know how that is.
Hopefully he can make an appearance if he can come down. Marty.
We may hear from my dogs, especially if your cat makes an appearance. So for people who have never heard the podcast, it's distinctive, I would say. It's unlike many podcasts. How would you describe it to somebody who's totally unfamiliar with it?
Yeah, no, it's unlike many other podcasts in that, you know, we remain untainted by quality or professionalism or anything of that nature. The show is essentially something I do with my friends and co-hosts, and I regard it as kind of we talk about politics, and that's certainly the vast majority of our focus is the news and contemporary politics, but I think of the show as comedy and politics is just our material. But, you know, it's, I guess, like sort of a political talk show based in, you know, what's the politics of what's being discussed online and the personalities who are discussing it, but from a, you know, our own political perspective, which is fairly left-wing. And I think it caught on in a way because it speaks to a perspective of people who, obviously hate the right wing and or our current president, but also are okay with liberals being made fun of as well, or the Democratic Party. And I think that's basically the hook of the show. And we read articles written by various people that we don't like, and we make fun of them, and we have a good time with one another.
Yeah. And there's a mixture, I find, of kinds of content. I mean, sometimes you'll do something that's more or less a reasonably straight interview of like some expert. That happens, but I guess more often it's your gang kind of like yucking it up. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, we'll do more serious interviews from time to time about a single subject, or we'll have an author on. We just had Michael Kupperman on. It was sort of an outlier episode. We did a whole hour about his book about his father, who was a quiz kid prodigy in the 1940s and 50s on one of these quiz shows, first on radio and then on TV. But the vast majority of the episode is like I plot out 2 or 3 different topics or things that have been in the news recently, and we just sort of tee off on them in a sort of conversational and riff-based format. But it is, largely about the pleasures of being with your friends and ganging up on other people and bullying them in audio format.
Yeah. Does that ever get you in trouble? I mean, I guess it helps being in New York. You see fewer of the people. You live in New York.
Yeah, I live in New York.
The people that you're skewering in New York than you might in Washington, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. If I lived in D.C., going out would be probably a little bit more awkward than it would be normally living in D.C.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess you mentioned that you're on the left, and the title of the book is the Chapo Guide to Revolution. Are you more or less officially socialist, or just kind of implicitly socialist? I mean, there is that vibe, but
I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think that's a question that's being asked of, what is being called the kind of the young or resurgent socialism in America. I mean, I'm a DSA member, but basically only on paper. I pay dues and I want them to succeed, but I don't have any really formal role or association with them outside of just my membership, because I joined after the election, like I think a lot of people did. But we did a fundraiser for Julia Salazar just last week. So outside of things like that, I mean, the question is what does it mean to be a socialist now in modern day America? Are you a member of a socialist organization? Which I am, but I don't have very much to do with, like I said, outside paying dues. Does socialism mean now just a better kind of liberal, or does it mean that that you want to have a collective ownership of the means of production? And I think people are still trying to figure that out, myself included.
Yeah.
But I call myself a socialist because I support socialist policies because it's what makes sense to me, and I think it's we should be as radical as reality, and I think the reality that we're living in is pretty radical, and I think our response to it demands something like socialism.
You mean it's radical because of the age of Trump, or the radicalism was welling up before that?
I think it was welling up before that, certainly. I mean, I think it's just a sense, and I credit the success of the show to that we started doing it at right around the time that the Democratic primary was starting to heat up in 2016 between Hillary and Bernie. And I think both we, personally and the country itself discovered that there was a fairly sizable number of people for whom the standard, liberalism or progressivism or whatever the brand of the Democratic Party was simply not sufficient or not getting it done. And the 2016 election results, I think, would be proof of that, beyond any shadow of a doubt.
So you're not buying the blame the Russians.
No, I mean, we've talked about this on the show before. I don't think I've yet to say, even I've never said it's all bullshit or it's all a hoax or whatever. I take it as read that Trump and everyone in his inner circle are ludicrously corrupt and criminals by nature. But like, I have yet to see any real presentation of the evidence that it changed the outcome of the election.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned both liberals and progressives. Is there a difference between the meaning of those terms? I'm still trying to figure that out.
I don't know. I don't
From
know.
where you stand.
It's just like, I think liberals started calling themselves progressive at one point because liberal had been so beat up on by the right. They wanted it to have sound something different. They wanted to, sound different than limousine liberal, or kind of like the stereotype of bleeding heart, sort of out of touch elites, and they glommed onto being a progressive or supporting progressivism. But I think it basically means the same thing.
Okay. And you said, I mean, you're not sure if you're, on the one hand, you stand for just a better form of liberalism or something else or something farther left. I mean, I wouldn't think you'd think of yourself as just a better kind of liberal, because you've kind of declared war on liberals, right? I mean, we should show people some illustrations from this book, I think. Who did the drawings, by the way?
Oh, Ellie Valley.
That's funny. I thought it looked like his style. I was wondering. Does he pronounce it Ellie? It's Ellie.
No, it's not Eli. It's pronounced Ellie.
Huh. Who knew? So anyway, let's you've got a section of kind of liberal profiles. I mean, well, first is kind of R.I.P. The blue collar Democrat is dead, extinct. It's basically a graveyard. We move on to celebrity dumbass. What is that? What does that capture about what you don't like about liberalism as in its current incarnation?
The celebrity dumbass figure, I think, just speaks to I think celebrity avatars of the Democratic Party and this kind of shallow Hollywood liberalism. That's the illustration is like it's a take on that famous who's the saint that was martyred that was riddled with arrows. That's the reference I gave to Ellie to the picture, but it's supposed to be like a red carpet, a red carpet event, and he's being shot with the arrows of his outraged conscience, and but behind him everything is being sponsored by Raytheon and the Weinstein Company. So I mean, celebrity dumbass is our caricature of well-meaning but ultimately out of their depth Hollywood politics, and not just out of their depth, but also in bed with a lot of really evil people as well.
Okay, so you've got Liberal Hawk. Now this is somebody holding a copy of the Atlantic, and in fact, a copy of the Atlantic that says Iran now or never, an allusion to like bombing or invading Iran. I'm wondering, is this supposed to actually be Jeffrey Goldberg, who is both the editor of the Atlantic now and the person who wrote the well-known cover story predicting that Israel would bomb Iran several years ago?
The image is not Jeffrey Goldberg. It is actually Jamie Kirchick.
Oh,
that was the visual reference for that.
Whoa,
one.
I actually see that now a little. That's pretty. That's a pretty obscure little message. I'm almost sorry that we spoiled it, because I'd like to see how many people picked up on that unaided.
The Liberal Hawk character. I mean, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. It's the people who always seem to find a good humanitarian reason for U.S. military empire and hegemony, and have not met an intervention or a war yet that they haven't been a fan of.
Yeah.
But all for, of course, liberal, good reasons that we all like and support.
This is just a footnote, but I had thought of Jamie Kirchick as being more of a neocon. Am I?
Yeah. No, we have a neocon character in the right wing grotesqueries, but I don't know. I think Jamie has ended up sort of in the neocon camp, but I think Jamie likes to think of himself as like the last liberal. He likes to I think he likes to position himself as like, I support free speech, and the good parts of America.
He's the classical liberal. Well, the Trump era has seen a number of neocons kind of drift toward liberalism and cultivate a liberal base as part of the opposition to Trump.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's telling that they don't actually have to drift that far. And I mean, you keep getting back to this Russia thing. I mean, one of the things that I keep harping on, or like that from the get-go, why I just cannot get on board with the resistance to Donald Trump or any of the people involved with it, is because of how willing they are to not just forgive, but actively promote and praise the likes of David Frum and Bill Kristol or Jamie Kirchhoff or any of these like Iraq war ghouls who, you know, I think in a sane society would be just put on a garbage skiff in the North Atlantic and just push them out and say goodbye.
Okay, so you are calling for the death penalty for neoconservatives, just to...
Oh, no, not the death penalty. You know, I mean, this is still this is when you ask, you know, am I really a socialist? You know, this is my liberal part speaking, is that, you know, I mean, I guess I can't countenance hangings or the guillotine. I just think at the very least, they should not be offering their opinions on anything in the media or the public forum. And then, you know, maybe we can get them in a glass box in The Hague sometime in the future. But at the very, very least, not just be, you know, having their asses kissed by people who are now so horrified by Donald Trump that they've forgotten entirely just who these people are and what they've done.
Yeah, Bill Kristol has been very effective in that way. And when I said drifting toward liberalism, I meant on domestic policy. I'm not under the illusion that his foreign policy has changed. It's more like he has a new constituency to, I assume, ideally from his point of view, support his foreign policy.
Yeah, well, I think for the neoconservatives, though, I don't think they've ever really cared about domestic policy at all. Like, I think the only real prize for them is American military might and empire and taking out Iran. That's what they really care about. And if they have to adopt a kind of tepid liberalism and, you know, speak out against racism here at home, I don't think it troubles their conscience at all to do it, because it's penny ante stakes for them. What they really, like I said, what they really care about is the grand prize of Iran.
By the way, I should say, if people who are not familiar with the podcast are sitting there thinking, wow, this guy really unloads on people, I would encourage them to actually listen to the podcast itself if they want to hear you really unload. This is a mildly subdued version of you, I would say.
Yeah. I've taken several tranquilizers before.
As I recommended by email.
I'm playing to the home audience, but oh no, I take it back. I'd be fine with executing all of the Iraq War intellectuals.
That's the real you.
There we go. Yeah,
that's the you I thought I had brought on my show.
Or I don't know, maybe not execution. Maybe we could give them a sporting chance. You know, like some sort of Thunderdome type combat between them.
I have no comment except that I'm against the death penalty. It's funny that I was going to ask about foreign policy because the book actually starts on that note, or on. I mean, the book is kind of a primer on on things like the world, liberals, and so on. But it starts with the world, which becomes immediately a critique of American foreign policy. It's a little surprising because for most socialists and people on the left, and liberals for that matter, that's not the main thing. Foreign policy isn't the main thing. It's not a primary motivator. It is a distinguishing point, between liberals and people further left, I find. But it's not. I'm just curious as to. I'm happy to see somebody paying this much attention to it, but I'm curious as to why.
I mean, I would agree with you. I think foreign poly. I'd like to develop that myself, but on the left right now in America, I think a comprehensive foreign policy vision and critique is the thing that's the most underdeveloped. And I think we started with the world because I don't think there's any real way to explain America or the state of things now without explaining how we got there. And, and that chapter is our attempt to do Noam Chomsky, but ruder, and describe what American hegemony looks like and how it functions over the, from the end of World War II to the to our present day. And I think it is hard to ignore, like, even if you wanted to have, let's say, we had, this is like the people who are further left than me, like, this is the critique they make of kind of social welfare liberalism or socialism, that, we can have this, let's say we have a wonderful, generous welfare state with free college and, education and healthcare and housing for everyone, and sort of a Scandinavian model. I mean, our foreign policy is what does by far the most actual harm to the largest number of people in the world. And if we're going to have such a wonderful country that's undergirded by this, hyper military domination and exploitation, it's really, well, then what's the point?
Yeah. By the way, if you are looking for a foreign policy vision for the left, I have just the thing for you, if I might do a little self-promotion. I've been trying to popularize the term progressive realism. Sorry about the word progressive. You may not be enthusiastic about that, but the concise version of it is found in The Nation. They right after the election, they asked some of us to do a little very, very short pieces, and I did one on touting progressive realism. It's kind of confusing because if you Google it, they affixed the editor's intro to the whole cluster to my piece, so it's a little confusing. But if you get below that, there it is in only about 600, 700 words. All your problems solved in that short of space.
And just also for me personally, like, it was the Iraq War, 9/11, the Iraq War, and the entire war on terrorism that probably did more to push me out of the, liberalism that I grew up in, or, I guess pushed me more to a more radical point of view, in that, like, the horizons of what we think is, possible, or what liberalism offers us, obviously is insufficient if what it's produced is, or what it's helped produce is, something like the Iraq War. And if many of the big liberal institutions that dominate American society all signed on for it. And I think that's very telling. And it was that was a hugely influential moment to me, seeing all this happen at the time and feeling like, am I the only person who thinks that this is insane and evil? No,
I was there with you. There were two.
Yeah.
But it was surprising to me at the time how rare full-throated opposition to the war was.
And not just opposition that, like, George Bush is an idiot, or that this is poorly conceived, or even worse, that the critique is that it was just poorly executed. I mean, the idea was that, this is insane to begin with. Like, we have no business invading and, overthrowing these countries. Saddam Hussein, as bad a dictator as he is, was not someone who ever posed anything like a real threat to American security.
Well, and the mind-blowing thing is, if you'll recall, we said we got the UN Security Council to pass a resolution saying you have to let these arms inspectors in. And we said, if you don't let these arms inspectors in, we're going to invade you. They let the arms inspectors in. They did not deny, and people forget, they did not deny them access to a single facility they asked to inspect. They did a little bullshit like token kind of brief resistance so that Saddam could seem strong before his people, and they refused to let us fly all their scientists out and interrogate them. Can't imagine why, but they let them inspect everything they asked to inspect, and we said, okay, thanks, we're going to invade anyway.
Well, yeah, and I seem to remember that them allowing the inspectors in became a reason that we had to go to war. In the media and in the minds of the people who wanted this war to happen more than anything. It was very clear that there was absolutely nothing that he could do to comply in a way that wouldn't result in the invasion of his country. And, so no, and just the Iraq War experience was very, it was like, just a definitional moment for me in, my political awareness, or just the idea that, like, these things aren't just a mistake, or they're not incompetent. They are evil and should be confronted and treated as such.
This kind of leads to back to your war on liberals. I noticed in the book that a couple of people you give a hard time on the liberal side are Matt Yglesias and Ezra Klein, and your complaint seems to be fundamentally their support of the Iraq War. Yeah. Now, I mean, I would say I have a couple of. I mean, I want to get broadly into the question of like tribalism, and I know you guys are kind of proudly pro-tribal, I think, whereas we're in a period where a lot of people, you know, including me, are worried about some aspects of the psychology of tribalism and how it's playing out. I mean, particularly in my case, as to whether it's actually playing into Trump's hands. But you proudly stand with tribalism as an ideal kind of. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but you take my point. I
mean, I don't know. I mean, like tribalism is certainly the word of the day, and yeah, lots of people are concerned about it. Again, I can imagine being disturbed by its effects on our society, but as a, I guess, satirist or someone who regards themselves as kind of a comedy writer, I think it's great for comedy. I mean, you know,
but that's I mean, just to pause on, it's an interesting thing about the podcast is that it isn't quite just comedy. There's actual commentary. It's unusual. I mean, we'll get back to tribalism, but do you have any like models from the past, or are there, or even the present things that media products that are kind of in your voice?
I mean, I would love to say like the great like Chris Morris news parody shows, like Brass Eye and The Day Today, or like the Thick of It Iannucci stuff. I mean, I guess the obvious answer would be like the early, like the Bush years of The Daily Show, and that.
Yeah, but that's
the Obama years sort of like exposed the kind of the limits of that kind of comedy that I think largely left the liberal side mostly unscathed, and that, you know, I guess you could make the argument that we're just taking the next step.
I think a little bit of Harry Shearer's show, Le Show.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if you remember kind of the golden years of that, but that was more pure kind of satire, again, without that much overt commentary. Anyway, back to like intra left tribalism. You like I said, you're kind of hard on Matt and Ezra. Matt's interesting because, you know, a lot of people who supported the war and then did a mea culpa, they didn't actually change their views about foreign policy. Matt's views about foreign policy, I think, would be 80% to your liking now, unless I'm mistaken.
I think I mentioned that in the book. I think he's recently said that he's against all war now, which I applaud. I just think it's funny it happened when he was like, you know, 36 or 30. I don't know how old Matt is. Probably
which is old to you, I know.
Yeah, well, I just turned 35, so it's not that old. But yeah, no, I mean, we're hard on Matt and Ezra in that section because, you know, it's a section of the book that talks about the dawn of the blogosphere. And, you know, they are two of the most prominent examples of people who have gotten, you know, careers out of their blogging careers. And I just remember mostly them being just kind of like these really like obnoxious, bratty, like Iraq war hawks. So, and then I think people have largely forgotten about that now that they're at, you know, Vox, and they're, you know, just sort of the nice liberal digital media people guys. But I think the example is instructive in that, you know, their Iraq war support just struck me as like sort of careerist. I mean, that's kind of how I described it. Like, I think when you read all those old war boosting posts from them, I just got the impression that they were like, look, maybe this is not something I would do if I was president, but all the serious people have basically got this figured out. And, you know, the anti-war side, they just don't look very serious. They're just not, they don't have their media chops put together. They got silly puppets in the street, and all the serious people, like that Kenneth Pollock book, was just so too damn convincing, and I don't know, like that just all still rubs me the wrong way. So I wanted to remind people of that in the book. Okay, but this leads to a question of tactics. When I was talking to my hardworking staff at Blogging Heads TV / Meaning of Life TV, and was asking if there are questions I should ask you, especially in light of the fact that they are all younger than me, my staff, and therefore closer to your target demographic. And one question was, what about this very fact of kind of like trashing liberals who may someday be potential allies? I mean, I know you're not primarily like a tactical, like political consulting firm, but the question was like, let's imagine, say that even Bernie Sanders is elected. Well, whatever he proposes on healthcare, Matt and Ezra would support. So there's, there's, the question, it's the timeless question kind of like how, right now it's playing out in this question of like, is socialism going to ruin our chances of beating Trump? Is abolish ICE going to ruin our chances of beating Trump? And so on. Like, is it that you have a position on that issue that's consistent with the voice of the podcast, or you just view your mission as like being something other than tactical? I I think we do have a consistent vision in terms of the actual commentary or politics that we support on the show. I would make a case that this is tactical, because I think Washington, D.C. media types love to be humiliated and abused to a certain degree, or they need it. There's something about them. They need to be nagged. They need to be I don't know. They like the abuse. So I think on a certain level, I'm helping Matt and Ezra come to Jesus or come to the right side by being rude to them, because I think that's what people in the media, that's how they like to be treated. I'm sort of kidding, but you say Matt and Ezra would support whatever Bernie's healthcare plan is, but I seem to remember Ezra writing, Vox publishing some big thing about how now is not the right time for single payer. So, well, I don't know. I don't trust either of them or their worldview far enough to throw it. Like, if they come around or if they support something I support, then all power to them. But I don't believe that me making fun of them is going to prevent them from doing the right thing eventually. Okay. And I don't think me not making fun of them or ignoring them completely or kissing their ass will have any effect on that either. Okay. And as far as the abolish ICE thing, or is socialism, I see a lot of op-eds now where they're like, hey, you may like this Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but I'll tell you who's really applauding her is the Republicans. And I just wonder, does this convince anyone, this kind of reverse psychology, where it's just do liberals really take seriously the advice offered to them in supposed good faith by right-wing op-ed hack artists? I just think I think liberals freak themselves out too much with this tactical thinking. I just think you should state openly and clearly what you believe in and the things that you wish to see politics achieve, and forget what the other side think. Forget what assholes are going to say about you regardless. Engage with your own conscience and reach out to other people forthrightly, rather than always trying to just sort of imagine what the worst, dumbest person in America in politics is going to say or think about. Okay. What about, by the way, do you ever run into any of these people? I said, you're in New York, that probably keeps you. Is everyone on the show in New York, or there's some Washington people? Yeah. They're all in New York. So, we're all here, yeah. So that affords you a certain comfortable distance from many of your targets. You have never run into Matt and Ezra at a party or anything? No, I never have. Okay. Well, I'll try to arrange that. Well, we're going to be in D.C. in September, so I will turn on my location, and anyone who wants to come fight me.
Here's a good question. Do you ever have people on the podcast that you fundamentally disagree with?
Yeah, early on, we did like a couple episodes where we had Robbie Suave of Reason Magazine on, and then in one sort of disastrous episode that is available on YouTube, we had American. What is he? He writes for The Week and I think American Conservative, sort of tradcath Matthew Walther on the show. I can't say either episodes were among my favorites, but having political debate on we've shied away from doing debate shows because I just don't think they make for very good or interesting shows, and I think it plays in to, again, this liberal fallacy about that we're seeing now, that civil debate is just the most important thing that we can all do. And I don't know, I think it's kind of a waste of time. I don't think it convinces anyone. I think it's just something that people engage in because they want to see their side win or score points, and it's just, I don't know, I don't find it very entertaining or fun to do. So it's not something that I've pursued heavily when I've been scheduling guests for the show.
Okay, so let's talk a little more about the other main kind of tribal divide, which is the Trump versus liberals, Trump versus the left, Trump versus anti-Trumpers. I mean, what you mentioned the resistance. What are your? It sounds like you have reservations about the way the resistance is conducting its business, to the extent that it's even a coherent thing. But is that right?
Yeah, I think they're looking for and I think the Russia investigation and their edification of Robert Mueller, I think it speaks to a flaw in their politics and their worldview, and that I think they're really seeking a kind of procedural or legal fix for a political problem. And I think they've eschewed developing politically to play detective ever since the election. And it reminds me of a lot of where I was at during the Bush administration, when I was, breathlessly following Plamegate or the Downing Street memos, or all of these investigations that I thought was going to be a magic bullet that would finally expose the lies that got us into the war in Iraq. And I think the point is, information or investigation is not some kind of silver bullet absent the power to enforce it or to make it a reality. All that all the information that you could possibly need is out there, but it doesn't affect politics unless there's some kind of power or political coalition behind it. And as far as the left or people who are against war in this country go, sadly don't really have that.
Okay, so there is a critique of the resistance's approach that I tend to make, which is that its form of tribalism kind of plays into his hands. I mean, Trump's narrative is that the whole world is against him, the entire establishment is against him and hates him, and makes too much of little trivial stuff. And I think, it's actually, he's not entirely hallucinating. I mean, a lot of people dislike him. It seems to me that even mainstream outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post are really are doing more editorializing in their reporting than they used to do as a kind of expression of their attitude toward Trump. And I think, I know that to some extent, this stuff for the hardest core of Trump supporters, none of this matters. They just love him. But it does seem to me that on the margins, with people who are kind of on the periphery of his base, to the extent that the blowback he gets is undiscerning and overwrought and hyperbolic, that kind of plays into his hands, and he's used it very successfully. He's convinced a whole lot of people that whatever Robert Mueller says is not to be trusted, which is impressive. But what do you That's a different tactics of tribalism question than I asked you about the left, about liberals. Do you see any logic here?
No, I see what you're saying. It's just, but as far as I just look at it as a, these people, myself included, I was firmly convinced Hillary was going to win the election. I did not see Donald Trump winning that election at all. We did a live show on election night. And we had planned bits, all assuming that Hillary was going to win the election, and had to change it on stage as we got the results in from Florida and Ohio. But I think this is all part of a broader thing of after the George W. Bush years, we got Obama. We got 2 terms of Obama, which really was basically what everyone had been asking for. That was at least personally, could not be more opposite to the 8 years that came before him, but politically was a failure. And then Hillary Clinton running again in 2016, just trying to double down on all of that, of this kind of managerial, resume burnishing liberalism that I think a lot of people really didn't quite get how loathed that kind of thing really is. And it came as a terrible shock. I mean, it is terrible. Donald Trump is a grotesque, and everything about his administration is vile to any decent person. But what concerns me is, rather than evolving politically or dealing with the failures of liberal politics and a liberal, the liberal agenda of the last 20 or 30 years, they've used this as just a way to just say, well, we didn't do anything wrong. We did everything right, and it was taken from us. It was stolen from us. And I think it's just an excuse to avoid any reflection or evolution in politically to anything slightly better, or to chart a path away from the kind of managing, what the Democratic Party has become, which is sort of, they've eschewed ideology of any kind, and have just become kind of a management consulting for just a handful of different interest groups that, don't really speak to the kind of, the misery and anger that people feel, and rightly so, in American life. I don't know. That's how I read it.
Okay, so you mentioned the word grotesque, which gives us an opportunity to show a couple more of these LA Valley things that I think are kind of relevant to Hillary, maybe. So you've got Wine Mom,
yeah.
And then you've also got, she may have a kind of relevance, you've also got Corporate Feminist. And you've got these little sketches. I mean, I apologize to the audio podcast listeners. Trust me, I'm showing cool pictures. And then there's a little written sketch to elaborate on what the critique is here. Talk a little about those 2 profiles and what they represent.
Beginning with Wine Mom, I think Wine Mom speaks to a certain kind of personality you will encounter if you are on Twitter and engaged in any political debate between the left and the Democratic Party. In that, Wine Mom is our stand-in for a certain kind of person who is sort of superficially woke, but was probably a Republican until about a year ago, that uses that sort of cynically invokes identity politics to cover for their own rotten beliefs, or the idea that any demand that the Democratic Party just do anything at all for the people who vote for them, or just be slightly better in any way, is deflected with that this is this is about sexism or racism, and this goes back to the Bernie bro thing, that opposition to Hillary is based in misogyny and not her politics, and this is a kind of sort of suburban mom figure who for whom Hillary was just like the perfect avatar of everything she aspires to and believes in, and the failure of that has not gone over well with them, at least online.
Yeah, I think the point about misogyny is interesting. I mean, I think there were a lot of people who just hated Hillary. You know, three of my siblings actually voted for Trump, so I have some.
You have some research into the.
I found myself unable to not do some research. I'd rather have not had to do, but one of them I know hated Hillary, but hated Bill just as much, and the hatred had started with Bill. It was a hatred of Clinton.
Yeah,
it was really not about Hillary any more than it was about Bill. I do think, I'm sure there was some misogynistic hatred of Hillary, but
of course. I mean, if you were a woman who has reached any level of notoriety, especially in politics, I don't want to seem like to discount that misogyny is something that absolutely is going to be, you're going to have to deal with, or it is a reality that shouldn't be dismissed. I'm just dismissing it largely when it comes from these people, because I think, again, I think it's a cynical evasion tactic that allows them to pretend that there is nothing further to their left, and that they can dismiss that anything that seems to critique or attack their politics is the result of some hidebound boys club and not an actual ideological differences.
Yeah, now you mentioned identity politics, and one manifestation of that, I guess, is feminism, or certainly certain brands of it. But it also gets into like Black Lives Matter and stuff. And there's been a lot of discussion of this, and there's been a critique that the left's emphasis on identity politics helped arouse a kind of white identity politics that then powered Trump into office. You're familiar with the argument, I'm sure. I'm still unclear on to what extent that argument is accepted on the part of the left you occupy. I mean, traditionally, people who make, like Mark Lilla made this argument, and I think got kind of accused of being on the right by virtue of having made the argument. But my sense is that there's a certain amount of sympathy for that argument on the left, that is left of liberalism. Is that your view?
I mean, I think there are some very. I read the Mark Lilla thing, or at least I read the op-eds that came out of it, and I found it to be mostly bogus. That being said, there are a lot of very serious thinkers on the left who are very critical of identity politics. Adolph Reed is one who comes to mind. He's someone whose work I really like and respect a lot. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think identity politics is what caused Trump to become president. I think, and to the extent that we satirize or make fun of a certain kind of identity politics, I think I am making fun of it to the extent that it is, as I've tried to explain, I think very cynically evoked by the right of the Democratic Party to fend off any challenge from their left, and to protect the brand of politics that is suitable and palatable to their donor base, which is, happily embracing of everyone's identity and against racism and bigotry of all kind, just so long as we don't nationalize healthcare or anything like that. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to be against things like racism or bigotry, or to call them out, or to articulate a political vision that is based in one's own identity. Like you bring up Black Lives Matter, it would be hard to discuss the police abuses and murders in this country without bringing identity into it. But I think identity politics has been, I think it's been cynically evoked and used as a kind of shield by the right wing of the Democratic Party. And that is what we're attempting to make fun of with some of these caricatures.
So you see the kind of Democratic Party's model as being, we get the money from Wall Street, then if we can keep the blacks and the Latinos on board and kind of feminists, then we just have the numbers, right? And
well, yeah. I mean, that was the whole, the permanent Obama majorities that, like the demographics of the country were going in such a way that it would, enshrine it doesn't really matter what happens down ballot because we're always going to have the presidency. So we're always going to, we're going to get the next 2 Supreme Court nominees, no problem. And obviously that didn't happen, and now we're in a dire situation because of that. But yeah, I mean, like for people who are serious activists for racial justice or feminism or whatever, I mean, I don't know. Like the ones I take seriously certainly don't take seriously the Democratic Party, who I think, outside of the campaign trail, has nothing but contempt for these people. I mean, I think they know that they have literally nowhere else for them to go. They know that they can, if you are, if you are pro-choice or black or the legal immigrant or the children of immigrants in this country, that there is no other party for you to go to. So that if you can, I think so that as such, they can, play lip service to courting their vote, but I don't think again, what they offer is being not as bad as the Republicans, and I think increasingly that's the only thing they offer.
You don't think that works as a bumper sticker? Not as bad as the Republicans?
I mean, it would be better than some of the slogans I've seen come up with, like, Medicare extra for all or something like that.
Kind of relatedly, is like, what's your model of the Trump voter? I mean, there's been a certain amount of disagreement about the question of to what extent the ultimate grievances are economic. In other words, like if the Democratic Party had been doing what you recommend and really taking care of health care and jobs and wages and stuff, one argument is problem solved, you wouldn't have a Trump. Another argument is, no, these people are racist and misogynists and whatever, and xenophobes and deeply anti-immigration and so on. You could have done all you want to improve the lot of the white working class family in Middle America, and it wouldn't have helped. Do you have a view there?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think the question always is, is there some theoretical percentage of people who voted for Trump? There was a certain amount of people who voted for Obama in 2012 who did vote for Trump in 2016. That is a cohort here. Is there some amount of hypothetical Trump voter who would vote for something different or against their own economic domination if it was on offer? So far, it hasn't been on offer, so I guess we'll never know. But I think we said right after the election that this idea that the Trump voter needs to be reached out to or courted to in any serious way is, I think, mostly hokum. I think the people who should be courted are the people who don't vote. That's the people that is a much larger mass of potential voters than people who voted for Trump. And in order to win them over, you would have to present a politics based in what I think would look like a real social democratic platform. That being said, what is my caricature? What is my vision of the Trump voter? When I think of the Trump voter, the people who support him the most, I don't think of the white working class. I don't think of someone who's just happy that he can go back to work in a coal mine again. I think Trump's real base is what the Republican base has always been, which is just sort of suburban middle to upper middle class white people and this idea that the Democratic Party is going to, apparently they're still going to try to do it, run on peeling away the decent moderate Republicans in the suburbs who are supposedly horrified by Trump. If they try to do that, then, look forward to Trump winning re-election in 2020. I mean, that's how I think, because I think those people are far more wedded to racist ideology and policies than this hypothetical white working class ever was or will be.
Yeah, although I do think my view on the election is that first of all, I do actually think Bernie Sanders probably would have beaten Trump. That's what the polls were saying. Nobody was really paying much attention to them. But the head-to-head matchup polls between Sanders and Trump, Sanders is doing better than Hillary. But I also actually think Joe Biden would have killed Trump. I think a lot of people.
We have said on the show, and my co-host Matt has said, any Democrat other than Hillary would have beaten Trump in 2016. Martin O'Malley would have.
I wouldn't go that far. Have you ever seen Martin O'Malley?
Yeah, I don't know. He's a handsome guy. He plays the guitar
until he starts talking.
Yeah, no. I think Joe Biden would have beaten Trump as well. I think Hillary at this time and place was uniquely the worst possible candidate to run against Donald Trump.
Yeah, but you're not worried. I mean, if you had your choice, you'd rather see Biden president than Trump. You just don't think that beating Trump requires putting up a moderate Democratic candidate.
No, I do not. I think, if anything, I think that would make him more, whatever the hypothetical candidate, more vulnerable. I mean, I think a broadly social democratic message is the most potent case or pitch to be made in a campaign against the kind of racist nationalism that Donald Trump represents.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it just seems to me that the Democrats can never just give people what they want. It's just they're always looking to just slice it just even ever thinner and thinner. They can never just, look at the Center for American Progress and, look at the policies they come up with. This is supposed to represent the policies of the next Democratic administration. And what they're coming up with is stuff like, Medicare for all plus, Medicare for almost everybody. They can never just go all the way. They always have to find some way to adulterate or tweak the thing that what people are actually asking for, and I think it's a way because look who funds the Center for American Progress. It's the same people. It's largely the same people who fund every other think tank in D.C., and that's why the policies that they come up with and the messages that they think they're going to campaign on are always so just DOA, or just I don't know what they're thinking or why they think they can't just say, we need to have universal health care and pay for it by raising taxes on the wealthy and the middle class.
Okay, and just to sustain this theme of intra-left conflict, I would be remiss if I didn't let you do a little podcast on podcast trash talk. You guys did you spent some time a while ago on your show talking about Pod Save America.
Yeah.
Is that kind of your idea of the enemy on the near enemy?
Well, there are sister podcasts in
the sense of.
It's a sibling rivalry between us. No, I mean, it's hardly a rivalry. They're 10 times bigger than we are. But yeah, when I just think, I'm sure Dan and John and Tommy, and I'm sure I don't think they're evil people, but when I think about their years in the Obama administration and, what they've come out of that supposedly having learned, I can't say I'm too enthusiastic or confident about their vision for the Democratic Party or the left in this country, because I think it just I don't know, it just all speaks to this very just bloodless technocratic managerial liberalism that I baffles me that it appeals to anyone. I just don't get it. It's like nails on a chalkboard to me. I think they've all been infected with this kind of Aaron Sorkin West Wing mind virus. This is their view of politics is never really, they're still cosplaying that show. And it's like I said, it rubs me the wrong way, but they're extremely popular, and if they motivate, they can get this blue wave going, then I guess I'll tip my hat to them. Okay.
Now I told you that I asked my relatively young staff if they had any questions for you, including any critical ones. One of them asked about your the podcast policy of making fun of the way people look sometimes.
I thought that would be
he mentioned names, but I won't mention them because they've been subject to enough abuse already.
Again, I don't think it's really possible to do comedy without being mean some of the time. We may be mean more of the time than some people might enjoy, but I'm trying to imagine the people whose looks we've made fun of before on the show, and quite honestly, I hate them all so much that you're going to have a hard time getting me to feel sorry for them because they're a little bit pudgy or dorky or weird looking. It does seem to be a feature of a lot of the think tank and media ghouls in Washington, D.C. is a kind of H.P. Lovecraft Innsmouth look, shall we say. But, as it comes to making fun of people's looks, I mean, whatever. Look, what I'll say about that is, they're certainly right to feel that way, or that they are, they are the captain of their own conscience, and if they find the style of humor that we do on the show objectionable or offensive, I would never say you're wrong for thinking that, or launch into some big philosophical debate about free speech and comedy and things like that. I just think the show is what it is. It's certainly not for everybody, and if we tried to make it appealing to everybody, I just think the show wouldn't be successful, or it wouldn't be fun or interesting for the people who do like it. Okay,
just briefly back to the Pod Save America thing. As I recall, somebody on that podcast where you all were talking about Pod Save America, maybe it was you, said that they actually in some ways find the Obama crew more abhorrent than the Hillary crew.
This was Felix had a rather inspired rant when we were reading Dan Pfeiffer's book, his memoir about his Obama years, where he really launched into it, and he really did say that he finds the Hillary Clinton hangers-on and the people in her orbit less repellent than the Obama comms people. And his argument was that the people around Hillary, they may be weird and insane, but at least they're sort of human, and their foibles are kind of human or compelling in a way that the Obama people aren't. The Obama people just are so kind of bland and feckless that Felix found them more disgusting than the Hillary diehards.
Okay,
because like Peter Dow is like one of our favorite foils on the show, and he sort of recently made a kind of a heel turn against the Clintons. But there's something about Peter Dow that is sort of relentless and compelling and human in a way that Jon Favreau and John Lovett could never even hope to aspire to.
Okay. And actually, I know I'm flitting around a lot, but the issue of making fun of the way people look, it reminded me that one of the people who was mentioned to me is a member of the intellectual dark web, with which you're presumably familiar.
Sure.
Do you have views on this? We should say, for people who don't know, like, this burst on the scene when there was a piece by what's her name, the New York Times editor.
Barry Weiss.
Yeah, Barry Weiss. She wrote a piece about the intellectual dark web, depicted them as kind of like trans-tribal or something. They are bound by an interest in honest and unhampered discourse, and that's all they have in common. Some people have noted that they actually do seem to tilt right on balance, but in any event, have you guys done something on them? I mean, you should if you haven't.
Yeah, we did. I don't know. I think we've mentioned the intellectual dark web in passing. We did do a whole episode on Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. So we have addressed this. As far as the IDW goes, I mean, I think it's one of the most laughable collections of nitwits and dorks ever assembled. Joe Rogan is probably the only one I regard as having any redeeming qualities. I think Joe Rogan does genuinely have an open mind. It's been opened by DMT so wide that he actually will entertain almost any idea. The rest of them, Sam Harris, Dave Rubin, Jordan Peterson, that guy used to work for Peter Thiel. I don't know what the rest of these.
That's Eric Weinstein.
Yeah, the lower wattage guys of these. But God, what a collection!
You got Ben Shapiro. Surely you're a Ben Shapiro fan.
Oh, Ben Shapiro. I'm a huge Shapiro fan. We've read his novel, True Allegiance, on the show. I've done an impression of him several times. I mean, again, back to this point about if you can't make fun of the way Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson look and talk, I don't even know why you're engaging with them to begin with. So, I mean, like the idea that I could discuss Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro without bringing up how they look and sound is ludicrous to me. But, yeah, as far as, God, yes, Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro are being sold now as rigorous free speech intellectuals. I mean, just honestly, I would blow my, honestly, I want to blow my brains out. It's suicide inducing to think or take seriously those people.
I'm starting to think Sam may not have you on his podcast to talk about this book.
We should have done a chapter on new atheism. I'm regretting that now that we didn't confront more of that.
Actually, it's been kind of done. I've done a certain amount of that. He is actually kind of mad at me, I think forever now. Okay, so that's you on the IDW. Is there anything else you want to say about the book? It's it's very much the voice of the podcast. We could show more pictures. We always do trigger warning for parents who have young children, but here is Liberty Babe.
Yes.
This is some of the people on the right.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say we've focused mainly on our warpath against the liberal pratfall artists and mediocrities of our time. But I assure you, liberal blogging heads fans out there, we are just as venomous, if not more so, to the right wing in this country.
Yeah, I gave that short.
There is room for us to come together. I am abusive to liberals in sort of the way a drill sergeant would be to boot camp.
It's because
I
you love
them because I want them to be better. I want them to be tougher and better prepared for what they're going to face in the years to come.
And they will thank you someday.
Yes, exactly. When they get in their first firefight against the IDW, they will thank me for being so mean to them.
Yep. So, but yeah, you're right. There's plenty of conservative trashing here. If people are worried about the balance of the book, I focused on more on the intra-tribal tribalism.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just like to state briefly. I mean, like the chapter 2 is liberals, and we tee off on liberals, and like again, I want to be clear. I think we say it very early on in the chapter. Like our argument in the book is not that liberals are as bad as conservatives. They're not as bad as conservatives. They just they have a flaw in their politics and their worldview that makes them such easy marks for the right. And I think, like, when we describe the history of American liberalism, certainly from like the Cold War to the present, it strikes us as sort of just a strategy of just buying time and seeking to, negotiate with and paper over the really atrocious problems caused in this, not problems, but, atrocities caused by U.S. imperialism and capitalism in the world, and ever just sort of seeking to buy time and compromise that to its breaking point, which we may be at right now with where Donald Trump and the right is going. And very briefly, our argument about the right wing in this country is that there is no such thing as a decent or intellectual version of conservatism in America. It's all bad and it's all the same. And it should not be, I don't know, there's no room there to be friendly with these people or respect them or be civil to them. They should be defeated. And that is the only political project that counts. Okay.
I'm not sure you're the cure to the tribalism problem in America today.
I don't know. I'd like to cure it, but I don't know. It's sort of like do it to them before they do it to you. You know.
Well, now that you put it that way. So, are you finding that as you get older, you mellow at all in your attitude towards evil people?
No. I think I'm getting. I think as I get older, I get angrier. You know. I mean, I remember what Alexander Coburn said to a young Ed Miliband when he was a intern at The Nation. I think he asked him right away, "Is your hate pure, Eddie?" And Eddie said, why, of course not, mister. I don't hate anyone. And that's when Alexander said, that's when I knew everything I needed to know about Ed Miliband. But yeah, no, I think keeping your hate pure is an important thing. And, I try to keep mine, diamond clean with every passing day.
Are there any people on the right you respect, maybe because they have the symmetrical attitude or anything? I mean, like, do you respect the real true believer or?
No, I don't respect the real true believers. I don't like them either. There are certain people on the right whose writing I really like and do. I would say it's only on the kind of American conservative anti-imperial right. Like I really like Daniel Larison. I read him a lot. I really like and respect Andrew Bacevich, but that's like sort of a niche of the very principled anti-imperial right. Those are the.
Well, it's something that Trump had claimed to represent in a way himself during the campaign. I mean, he at times made noises about picking up on that part of like paleo conservatism's
policy. I mean, he said like the Iraq War. That was some of my favorite parts of the 2016 campaign is when he was on stage with every other Republican and he said, "Folks, how stupid was the Iraq War? We didn't even have a victory." That was one of my favorite moments. And but yeah, as far as the other sort of traditional paleocon right, it's everything else that goes along with that anti-imperial critique is terrifying. You know, like the Pat Buchanan worldview. I can't say I have a great deal of affection or respect for.
No, he's full on. Buchanan is full on. You know, nativist and so on. Many of the things you wouldn't like about Trump, in addition to being relatively enlightened on foreign policy.
But no, I mean, I guess if I want people to take one message away from the book, it's that the never Trump right wing should be obliterated even before we start dealing with the MAGA Make America Great people.
So you've already got the order of executions.
Yeah, they're a softer target. They need to be taken out first to prepare the kinetic battle space. Before we can take on the MAGA people.
But this is all after the revolution. And, of course, if we're going to have the revolution, people must read this book, The Chapo Guide to Revolution. So before we sign off, I think, first of all, you should graciously give credit to your co-authors, right? Who are
my co-authors are Matt Crispin, Felix Biederman, Brendan James, and Virgil Texas. They were my co-authors to the book. And also, absolutely shout out Ellie Valley and John White, who did the art for the book. Without Ellie's art, I feel like the book would be like Manhattan without Central Park.
Yeah, he's
ugly,
great.
Cluttered, and full of too much stuff.
Yeah. Now, of all of you, I got to say, you do not win the best name contest. That goes to Virgil, Texas. It was Virgil. That was his. That's the name he was born with. I mean, I like it. I'm from Texas.
No comment on that.
Okay.
I will just say Virgil, Texas does have has the best name of any of us.
By far, by long shot. And I don't want you to take offense, but by like a really long shot, he's got the best name. And then finally, you have to tell people where the name of the podcast and book comes from, Chapo Trap House.
Oh man, that is the only reference we have ever made to it was just in passing on our very first episode, at the end of our very first episode, I just said it, and it was almost off the top of my head, and it just stuck with it. And like the only thought behind it is I was listening to a lot of trap music at the time I started doing the show.
What is trap music? Suppose someone
it's a genre of rap music that's sort of like a kind of stripped down sound that originated in the South mostly, with like Young Jeezy and Gucci Mane and some of the producers they worked with. That, you know, and the trap house refers to the abandoned house that one would sell drugs out of. And so I was listening to a lot of that music when I was thinking about doing the show, and it just kind of came to me. But mainly, I knew it was going to be a politically themed podcast, and I wanted it to sound so ludicrously and stupidly different. I wanted it to sound so dumb that it would, or just so different than anything else that we were competing with, that it would have to stand out. Because like every other politics podcast is called like, you know, the Dialogue Hour or, you know, Chat Zone or stuff like that. So I just wanted it to sound and look like something from a different galaxy than our competitors.
It is distinctive. And Chapo is a drug lord, right?
Yeah. El Chapo is the drug lord. Yeah.
No, it does stand out. And the book stands out. It's all different. You're doing something different than what other people are doing.
That's all I can ask for. That's all I can hope for.
That's the first step toward either becoming very famous or widely hated.
Well, I think I can take, it's like they said at the end of Spinal Tap, you know, as long as there's no rock, as long as there's still sex and drugs, I think I can do without the rock and roll.
Okay. Well, enjoy it. Enjoy the book experience.
Thank you.
Okay. And thanks for taking the time, Will.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on, Bob.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.